So, hello everybody. I hope every one of you had enough of the lunch and is ready for a session. Today's talk is about Vaadin 7, more specifically Vaadin 7 in the enterprise. My name is Dominik Dorn. I work for a company called Research Industrial Systems Engineering, and I'm from Vienna in Austria. Besides working, I'm also doing some open source stuff. I'm the lead of a Java user group, and I'm always working with some new technologies and have to face some bugs with them. So I'm always trying to do something new, and that's quite fascinating for me. So, first question for the audience. Please raise your hand if you know Vaadin. Okay, quite a few. Please raise your hand if you've been using Vaadin before. Okay, also some. Good. So I will show you some opinions of mine. The first opinion is creating scalable desktop-like enterprise applications is hard. Who is in this with me? Okay. The second opinion of mine is that it's really hard to create a consistent and accessible and functional user experience and user interface. Who has the same opinion? Please raise your hands. Okay. And the third opinion is it's really hard to create web-based rich clients that allow to where you are able to scale to a lot of concurrent users. Who's in this? Okay. So enough hand raising. I know you might be tired from the party yesterday, so. Oh, okay. One other opinion. It's really hard to scale to multiple development teams. Who is in this with me? Okay. So. In my opinion, Vaadin 7 helps us to solve some or maybe most of these problems. And I'm going to show you how we did this. The case study is we are working for a national insurance company in Austria. They have multiple concurrent releases with different scopes of functionality. There's always a tight schedule in the project, and the teams have to work concurrently to get the stuff done. We are working to support visually impaired users, so we have some people that are blind or nearly blind, and we are supporting more than 5,000 concurrent users with our application. We have a clustered environment with IBM WebSphere version 8.0. And for development, we are using Apache Tommy. So that's also the shirt I'm wearing. Tommy is the new cool thing. So let's show you something. The task is to allow for a high level of concurrent development to provide a great user experience and in the same way keep the code base structured and clean and maintainable. And we have to scale to a huge amount of concurrent users. So I wanted to show you 5 steps to success, but some colleagues of mine thought, well, it might not be the whole truth. So I said, okay, well, we call it 5 proven practices. So as usual, this is like a buffet. So if you like something, take it, apply it to your project. It's not the only truth out there, so it might work for you, it might not work for you. I just hope it's something you might not know or you can use it in your project somehow. So the first step is to create UI and user experience mockups. So in our company, to create UI mockups, you have to keep in mind that you should create a more or less stateless web app. So you shouldn't keep all kinds of user state. You shouldn't remember everything the user ever clicked or saved away, and you really should work with the people that will use the web app. So you really you should work with them, and you should focus on the functionality and don't do pixel shifting. I know some managers really like to have everything nice and shiny, but focus on functionality, focus on user experience first, and then make it nice and shiny. The tools we are using in our project is balsamic mockups. We are creating mockups for every user story or every feature the customer wants from us. From these mockups, we create user stories, and from the user stories, we divide these stories into multiple tasks the developers then carry out. We also used Photoshop to do some kind of design mockup. It was nice to visualize to the customer how the application will look like, but it's not really necessary. So if you're doing mockups with Balsamic, you're perfectly fine. This is a screenshot of one of our mockups in the early stage of the application. From this mockup, we created the Photoshop template, and we partly tried to create a Vaadin theme out of it. As you can see, this is a screenshot from the application, how it looks in the end. So, yeah, we didn't really stick to the Photoshop template because the customer had an older legacy application that he wanted to support as well. So we had to downgrade on a few things. Here you can see a mockup with added descriptions. So our designer or user experience specialist always talks to the people that will be working with the application, and he creates those tiny sticky notes on the mockups, so we as developers know what to do and what the how the components should behave. It proved really well, and is a nice gadget because it's easier to work with some kind of visual aid than to have pages and pages of text that you have to interpret somehow. Okay, so first thing, create UI mockups. The second practice is to keep your code base clean and structured. So we do this by grouping functionality, and we group this functionality by common use cases, by the releases given from the customer, and by our business entities. So our build architecture, our build is based on Apache Maven. We're using Maven 3. As you can see, we have a core module. So how does this work? So we have a core module that's basically containing all the stuff that every module needs. We have a utility module that has helper stuff, and every basic module of our application has submodules. One submodule is for the front end. Then we have two submodules for the backend. In one submodule, we define the API of the backend, and in the second submodule, we have the implementation of the backend. All these submodules have a parent module where we define common properties and helper stuff like configuration of Tommy or Open Web Beans and OpenGPA and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's how our architecture basically looks from another point of view. Basically, we have the front ends on the top. Between the front ends and the back ends, we use CDI. Tommy, as well as the WebSphere application server, uses OpenEGB, and we use Apache Data Spike to have some helpers for working with CDI. Between the front end and the back end, we use data transfer objects, and between the back end and the database, we use the JPA entities, and we also have connections to various web services where we just use Apache CXF. That's basically the ChecksRS and ChecksWS implementation of Apache. So on the top, well, I showed you before, we have this core package, and in this core package we have a front-end module that allows other modules to register themselves. So in the core we have our main UI, and this new UI has a navigator. That's basically the Vaadin navigator class. We have our own navigation class that helps us with navigation, and we have the view display that basically displays all the views. And the other front-end modules dynamically register to the core front-end module, and they all have their own backends, except for functionality that's commonly used. This is going directly to the core backend. So, step 3, maintainability. It's really hard to keep your code base clean if you have so many people working concurrently on the project, and it quite easy gets to a mess. So we have developed a structure that worked quite well for us, and this is done by applying the MVP, Model View Presenter design pattern, and we're doing tests with Mockito and TestNG. So here you can see one question: who knows Model View Presenter? Please raise your hand. Okay, quite a few. So this is our way of doing Model View Presenter. We have the view in an interface. We have an implementation of that interface. We have a presenter that knows the view, and the view knows the presenter. And we have some kind of model. For those of you that don't know Model View Presenter, if you're working with Vaadin, it should be something that you should look at quite at the beginning, because it helps you really to keep your code base clean. Yes. In our project, we created some helper classes. Basically, we created an abstract view and an abstract presenter. The abstract view and the presenter both are typed, so we tie them together to easily allow to work with them. Yeah, the way you should. Yeah, that's an example of how we are using this concept. Basically, you just create subclasses of the abstract view and the abstract presenter, and then you start by entering the enter method, and you're creating some kind of how should I call it? Well, you're changing from one class to another, always saying, hey, okay, I'm the view, I was entered, now presenter, I invoke the enter method on you, and you decide what's going on next. And then the presenter says, okay, I got this kind of input values, I should do this and that, view, display this button there, or show that message. And that's also the way you can easily test this. So really, it's really important to test your application code, and Vaadin somehow really loves Mockito, and Mockito loves Vaadin. Well, maybe the projects themselves not, but they are really a perfect match together. So I hope you can read this. That's basically how you can test your views and your presenters. Basically, you just mock either the view or the presenter, and then you can really assert what's going on, test what is going on. You, for example, here we are testing that some input parameter was entered to the presenter, and that the presenter should call some service. You can do this with all kinds of components in your application, and it's really handy because it's all Java. You can test it with test-ng and Mockito. Good. So let's go to scalability. The first rule of scalability is in Vaadin is keep your sessions thin. So if you're using Twitter, this might be something you want to tweet, because the tweet wall is quite empty. But you should really keep this in mind. Keep your sessions thin, because in Vaadin, everything you put on the display of a user is stored is basically attached to a UI, and this UI is stored in a facility called the Vaadin session, and the Vaadin session is a part of the HTTP session. So if you have lots of components on your screen, all these components get stored in the HTTP session, and this gets messy quite quickly. So basically you always have this your UI, the UI is your base class, and in the UI you should have a navigator and a view display, and the navigator then can decide which view should be displayed in a view display. And I highly recommend to use first this. So the session gets huge quite quickly. If you start with a new Vaadin application, you are around 500, to 700 kilobytes. In our application, we got quite quickly to 3.5 megabytes per user session. And on Stack Overflow, there was a guy that already had 15 megabytes in his HTTP session. So if you are in the need of clustering, this gets to be a real performance problem, because all these megabytes have to be shifted around on every request, and that's not good for your scalability. Another problem is that most commonly users are using delta replication to replicate the session state, and the way Vaadin stores their objects in the HTTP session, this is broken at least in Tomcat and in the WebSphere applications server. So with delta replication, we even managed to crash Tomcat with a segfault. That was not a very funny experience. So basically you have to use full session replication on every request, and if the session gets too big, this gets really painful. The Vaadin guys are working on pluggable storage mechanisms for the session. They are using this together with Google App Engine right now, and there is it's in the works so that you can exchange the way you store your session. For example, you can then just put it into some Memcached server, and that will hopefully fix some of the problem. But you're just curing some symptoms, so you should focus on keeping the sessions thin, so this replication doesn't really get to be a problem. Okay, 3 recommendations to keep your sessions in is to use stateless views as much as possible. You can get stateless views by using the class-based navigator. So for who has been using the Vaadin navigator before? Please raise your hand. Wow, okay, good. The navigator is a new concept introduced in Vaadin 7. It's basically adopted from GWT, and the navigator is a way how you can create and structure your application to make bookmarkable URLs, like you know, from Twitter with the hash and hashbang and then some names, or on Facebook. They all have this special kind of URL. And this concept was introduced in Vaadin as well, so you can basically bookmark the state your application is in, and the navigator make sure that if a URL with some certain state is entered, that the correct view is rendered. So if you use the navigator, make sure that you use the class-based approach and not the object-based approach, because this will make sure that the view is correctly discarded after another view is loaded and not staying in the session. The second tip is that you should load data that components need in the attach method of a component. So you basically always, in Vaadin you're always extending components, and you should override the attach method to do loading of data there, like huge amounts of drop-down fields or stuff like that. You should always load this data on the attach method, and you should also override the detach method, so this data gets discarded when the view is switched. The detach method, the attach and the detach methods are always executed in the lifecycle of a Vaadin request, because when the session gets serialized, the detach method will be called, and if it gets deserialized, so from string to object again, the attach method will be called again. And if you're using this approach with the attach and the detach method, you can make sure that all the values that are in the drop-down fields and stuff like that doesn't get put into the session. Okay, productivity. In our project we are using Java EE6, the web profile, and there are some things that really help you to work together with Java EE6. One tip is to use CDI and EGBs for dependency injection and transaction handling. There is a plugin for CDI on the Vaadin homepage. Right now it's a little bit broken, so it won't work with session replication. We have created our own fork of that and are right now incorporating our changes back to this module. So the plugin is right now experimental, and I hope that we get our changes back to them quite soon, so this will get into a workable state. Right now you can use the plugin, but beware that you will not have support for session replication, because it has some unserializable stuff in it, and well, that just don't work. The CDI plugin is built up with some classes. You basically have some annotations like CDI view, CDI UI. You have a custom scope, the UI scope, and you have annotation for URL mapping, so you can basically map some views to some passes. They have internally a CDI view provider and a UI provider that is necessary to basically to hook into Vaadin's mechanism and allow the add inject annotation in your code. On the right side you can see some examples of a UI and how it is mapped with the CDI plugin. On the bottom you also have a view that is mapped with the CDI plugin, and you see this instrumented view. That's basically how the view gets registered in the navigator. One example I prepared for the demo was a JMS application that is using Vaadin push. So Vaadin push is a mechanism to push server-side changes to the client in an asynchronous way. Behind the scenes, it is using the Atmosphere project. And in this example, I just created a utility class to work with JMS. So in the demo application, it was possible to basically chat in one window and the text will appear in another, or move a button around. It works quite well. The thing you have to keep in mind is that you have to enable the async supported flag in your web XML, and that you have to add the push annotation to your UI. Yes. So that's basically what is happening if you are, well, in the demo application. What would happen if I entered the demo the enter method of the view? I just pushing a message to the JMS queue, and the other view is then basically registering as a consumer of this message queue and is updating some label. The thing you have to keep in mind here is that you have to log the session. You can obtain a log by UI get queue and get session get log instance. The Vaadin guys have a helper class, have created a helper class that you can extend to basically create runnables that support these push mechanisms correctly without you without the need that you manually log the session. Okay. Another productivity enhancer is the JPA container of Vaadin. So with the JPA container, you can easily map your entities and use them in various ways, like filling out forms or populating drop-down selects. We haven't used it in our project because well, the product owner wanted to have DTOs in place, but if you're in full control of your application, you might as well use the JPA container to quickly bootstrap your application. Okay, and productivity enhancers. Well, a really great enhancer is JRebel. Who knows what JRebel is? Okay, lots of you. So for those that don't know JRebel, it's a tool that allows you to dynamically reload classes at runtime. So you basically can create some code, change some code, compile it again, and you can view the changes in your browser without the need to redeploy. It literally saved me hours of work. It has integration for CDI, for Vaadin, for Tommy, well, for the VAS I don't know, but at least for Tommy. And it even comes bundled with the Vaadin Pro edition. When using JRebel, it's a good practice to always, to make your components always extend custom component, because that way you can always change the components internals, like changing it from a horizontal layout to a vertical layout or a grid layout. And that's making it quite easy to work with them, because JRebel unfortunately doesn't support to reload classes where you change the base class. So when you are extending custom component, you won't get into trouble there. Another productivity enhancer is the Vaadin test bench. It's basically a fork or an adaptation to Selenium 2, I think. So it has some special hooks into the Vaadin components, so you don't have to mess around with XPath or some custom IDs, and it really helps you to make quickly Selenium-based tests for your application. Well, yeah. It's built on Selenium, and it even has support for Phantom.js. Who knows what Phantom.js is? Please raise your hand. Oh, okay. So Phantom.js is a way to run Selenium-based tests without a browser. So it basically emulates a browser and allows the Selenium-based test to be run on your, for example, your integration server without the need to have some kind of display X server or something running. Yeah, it's also included in the Pro account, but you can also purchase it without a Pro account. Oh, JRebel is working on a new version where you can change the superclass and interface. That's awesome. So till then, just extend custom component. It helps you. Okay. The good thing on test bench is that it also has support for JBehave. We had to change the language of JBehave for our project to be German, so the customers create their own tests. It's a good way to verify that what you're creating is really what the customer wants. So if you haven't been using JBehave before, give it a try. Oh yeah, and that's yeah. So another nice trick if you don't have the money for a Pro account or JRebel is to use the Tommy Maven plugin and package all the dependencies of your Vaadin application as application server scope. So with this trick, you're basically reducing the size of your WAR file to a few 100 kilobytes instead of megabytes. By default, if you package a Vaadin application, you end up with around 15 to 30 megabytes. And if you're doing this trick, you will have to just reload 500 kilobytes, and the redeployment of your application gets really, really fast. So if you want to save some money or don't want to invest in JRebel, that's a trick how you can really do fast redeploys, like below 1 second. So it's a nice trick. So I'm almost finished with my talk. A quick recall. The first thing we did in our project is to do requirements analysis. So we create, we talk to the customers, we create mockups, and from the mockups we create user stories. Our design, we have people in place that are creating tests with TestBench. So this helps us to ensure that what we are building is really what the customer wants. The second important thing is that you should structure your code. We structured our code like I showed before with various Maven modules. We have this package of front-end, API, back-end for every major release of our software. Well, not release in the thing like you're releasing, but release in parts of milestones. We use the model view presenter pattern. We use TDD together with TestNG and Mockito. We use CI and Delta Spike, so this has worked quite well. If you want to try it out, it's a good start. The most important thing you have to remember today is that you should keep the application scalable by keeping the sessions thin. And that a good trick is to use class-based views and to iterate fast. So use JRebel, use TestBench, use this trick I showed you to really have a fast development experience. It's the worst thing you can have is to wait 5 minutes for redeploy or even more. With these tools, you have redeploys in under 1 second, and it's really fun to create web applications that way. So I have to give some credits to my colleagues because that's not all my personal knowledge. Yeah. Thank you, guys. That's all for my talk. I have created a web page with a formula for mailing list. So I will be posting to this mailing list every time I create new stuff with Vaadin, some new blog posts or utilities I find useful. So if you want, you can subscribe at this URL, dominikdorn.com/Vaadin7. I'm also on Twitter. I have a blog where I sometimes blog, not very often, but sometimes. So if you have any questions, please ask them now or write me an email and get in touch. I always like to discuss with other people. Thank you.
Thank you very much.